Living in the wake of tragedy, a North Carolina community perseveres.
We did her celebration of life on what was supposed to be our wedding day.
People in the Hedingham neighborhood say the 6 months since a mass shooter forever changed their community has not been easy.
Even if you wanted to think it was just a dream, a bad dream, that it all was just a bad dream, you were reminded daily that it wasn't.
Now we go back to this East Raleigh community to see how they're working to heal.
And what they hope to change so that no one else has to live through the devastation that follows gun violence.
It shouldn't be the right versus the left. It shouldn't be. It should be everybody for everybody.
Hello everyone, we appreciate you being with us. I'm Justin Quisenberry.
And I'm Caroline Blair. On a Thursday evening last October, the Raleigh neighborhood of Hedingham was rocked by something none of us ever want to experience: an active shooter in their midst.
It's hard to believe, but it has been 6 months since that mass shooting right here in the eastern part of our state's capital.
Now, as you can see, we are back here at the Hedingham neighborhood, and we have a special series of stories for you, looking at the change in the lives of those affected and the path forward for loved ones, neighbors, and the people of Raleigh.
First, we want to take a quick look back at what happened when those lives were lost here on October 13th, 2022. Police say a 15-year-old began shooting as he moved from his own house through the streets of Hedingham, down the Neuse River Greenway, and into a wooded area. 5 people died that day.
And these are their names and faces. 29-year-old Raleigh police officer Gabriel Torres. He was a hardcore New York Knicks and Jets fan. He survived by his wife and his daughter, who was just 2 years old when her father died.
34-year-old Navy veteran Mary Marshall was said to have an infectious laugh and left behind her soon-to-be husband. We'll hear from him in just a moment.
49-year-old Susan Carnes. She loved to exercise. She was an avid runner and a wife and mother of 3 boys.
52-year-old Nicole Connor's friends tell us that she had a loving spirit, which she shared with her husband, stepchildren, and grandchildren.
And the youngest victim was the suspect's own brother, 16-year-old James Thompson.
Thompson loved deep-sea fishing, playing basketball, video games, and also loved trips to the beach and the mountains. We have a team of Spectrum News 1 reporters who have spent the last few weeks connecting with people here in the Hedingham community.
Over the next half hour, our Sarah Rudlane, Patrick Thomas, and Jenna Ray Gardner will bring you stories from those impacted by this tragedy.
And we go first to our Sarah Rudlang, who spoke with the fiance of Mary Marshall about losing her just days before they were supposed to be married. And Sarah, I just can't imagine what these last 6 months have been like.
Now, Justin, the days have been long, but the months short. That's what Rob Steele told me when we sat down to talk about the love of his life. And while she didn't have any kids, he says she was excited to be a stepmom to his son and daughter, and they miss her so much every day.
Every time I see her smile about us, it brings me comfort.
The pain of losing a loved one never really goes away.
Having him here, it's like having a piece of her still.
Mary Marshall was Scruff's person.
Come here, Scruff. Hey, come here.
She was Rob Steele's person, too.
Mary and Scruff were together for more than 10 years. He adopted her, not the other way around.
6 months ago, Mary and Scruff were on a late afternoon walk. It was Thursday, October 13th. Mary never made it home again. And for Scruff, she was his home.
I remember the officer looking at me. He got very emotional. And as he handed me Scruff's leash, he said, Scruff was a very good boy. He stayed with her and he protected her, and he was barking and growling at anybody who got too close to her.
A 15-year-old boy shot 7 people that night. Mary was one of 5 who died in the attack. Her wedding vows replaced with goodbyes.
16 days. We did her celebration of life on what was supposed to be our wedding day.
2 days after her death, Rob found his wedding ring and the secret engraving Mary snuck on the inside.
Mary made me promise not to go looking for it.
It says, "You're my favorite place."
Opened it up and saw what the engraving was. I just bawled.
A lot of people are wondering,
How are you doing?
I was going through the motions. Some days I couldn't go to bed because I didn't want to go climb into an empty bed. Some days I had a hard time getting out of bed because I didn't see a point.
Today, he's moving forward by pushing for change.
Putting effort in is helping. Staying busy is helping. Working on things that I'm passionate about and Mary would have been passionate about is helping.
In hopes of preventing another mass shooting like Hedingham ever again. Now, Rob also told me about some of the steps he's trying to make to prevent tragedies like this from happening in other communities. I'll have more on that in just a few minutes. Plus, I'll introduce you to the new Raleigh City Council member who now represents District B, which includes the Hedingham neighborhood. Justin, Caroline?
Sarah, thank you, and we appreciate Rob Steele sharing what this journey has been like for him.
Absolutely unimaginable. And you know, this was such a major event for this community that even those who didn't directly lose someone, well, they're still being impacted.
Yeah, Spectrum News 1's Patrick Thomas caught back up with a neighbor that we spoke with about 6 months ago about how they're all working to move forward after such a loss.
Now, Patrick, we know you were out there reporting that night and in the days, the weeks, and the months since.
Caroline and Justin, thinking about everything that happened that night and standing here 6 months later feels so surreal. When you enter the Hedingham neighborhood, so much of that night comes back to life. To get a better sense of what life is like living here after the tragedy, I talked to a neighbor one-on-one, and a last-second decision to not walk a dog may have been what saved a woman's life. These walks are a breath of fresh air for Angel Fagans and her rescue dog, Juno.
It makes you feel good.
Similar to the feeling of moving to Raleigh's Hedingham community with her son, Cameron, from Los Angeles for a cheaper, better cost of living in July of 2021.
Good girl. Slower pace of life. I still had big city conveniences, but a smaller city.
Complete with a golf course and room to roam.
I feel safe for the most part. It's a pretty quiet community.
At least that's how she felt before October 13th last fall, when the 49-year-old tells me how a last-second choice not to walk her dog may have been a life-saving decision.
So when I had taken her out front of the house, I started hearing the sirens.
A loud, clamoring mix of gunfire, police sirens, and blue lights entering and overtaking the neighborhood. 5 people, some of them neighbors, were killed by a mass shooter investigators say was from the community, who also was a classmate of Fagan's son at Knightdale High School.
I mean, only thing I can tell him is, I'm sorry. I took you from a city of 11 million people to 460 some odd thousand people for this to happen.
Instantly, their slice of heaven would become a living hell.
For 2 nights after that incident, I had nightmares about blue lights flashing. It was crazy. Had I known, I would have sheltered in place.
One of the reasons why she was in the dark was because the city and Wake County did not send electronic cell phone alerts warning people a killer was on the run.
Clearly, active shooters has become a way of life. And it seems like that they would put measures in place to let their citizens know.
The horrors of that dark night trigger apprehension for Fagans to this day.
I think the things that change is just you are hyper aware of things and people around you. Good morning.
What would normally be a hi and goodbye greeting is suddenly a deeper conversation with her neighbors, the Fawcett's, about safety concerns.
And how things have changed or not changed and things that need to happen. It's scary.
I wouldn't want to be a parent right now or a child in grammar school anymore.
When I drop Cameron off, you know, it's the I love you, have a great day. And I will not let him get out of the car till he tells me he loves me too. Because God forbid that's the last time I get to see my son or talk to my son. there sometimes.
Fagans will keep putting one foot in front of the other, painfully joining a group of Americans experiencing the direct or indirect effects of gun violence, staining their memories forever. Angel Fagans hopes the city of Raleigh or the Hedingham Homeowners Association can in some way erect a monument honoring the lives of the 5 victims. Caroline and Justin, back to you.
Yeah, that certainly would be a fitting tribute, as everyone really is trying to just find ways to cope and to remember those lives lost.
Yeah, the healing continues. Patrick, thanks. And we want to talk a little bit more now about something that Patrick just mentioned, the Wake County Alert System.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people wanted to know why it wasn't activated during this active shooter situation. It's a question that we asked 6 months ago, and it is a question that we asked again this week.
A spokesperson with the Raleigh Police Department tells us they understand the need for information during incidents like the Hedingham mass shooting, and said they use traditional and social media such as Nextdoor to inform people that day.
Now they say they're assessing those communication processes, but they gave no response to whether they would activate the alert system if this ever happens again. Coming up.
We need to be advocating during the times of calm and during the times of peace.
Members of the faith community continue working to prevent gun violence, what one religious leader in our state believes churches should be doing for their communities.
Plus, 2 of the 5 victims of the mass shooting were shot and killed on the greenway that runs by this neighborhood. But greenways are a place of peace for many people and a source of pride for the city of Raleigh. Next, we meet a woman who volunteers her time to try to keep them safe for everyone.
Yes, I have a male shot, Hispanic. Okay. He's an off-duty cop? Where's his badge? He's an off-duty officer.
Chilling words from last October 13th as fear and violence rolled through Raleigh's Hedingham neighborhood.
We're marking 6 months since that mass shooting here in the Hedingham neighborhood of Raleigh. And we spoke with Wake County District Attorney Lauren Freeman about where the case stands against the accused shooter, 15-year-old Austin Thompson.
She tells us the case remains in juvenile court and says her office will take steps to bring it to adult court if given the opportunity.
We know Thompson was in critical condition after police say he shot himself before being captured. Freeman tells us factors such as fitness to stand trial usually delay these kinds of cases. We want to check back in with our Sarah Rudlang, who's standing by now outside the Raleigh City Council chambers.
And Sarah, you spoke with Mary Marshall's fiance and a new Raleigh City Council member. What message do they want shared?
You're not forgotten. That's the message from the new Raleigh City Council member who now represents District B, which includes the Hedingham neighborhood. She and Rob Steele say a path toward healing starts with change. The flowers and condolences that once lined Raleigh's Hedingham neighborhood have been replaced with resolution.
They're going to get sick and tired of hearing me and seeing my face.
6 months ago, Rob Steele's life changed forever when a 15-year-old boy gunned down 7 people. 5 people died that night, including Steele's fiancée, Mary Marshall. It was just 2 weeks before their wedding day.
She was the best person ever.
Following the October 13th attack, Steele had a strong message for the Raleigh City Council.
I am calling here and now for your immediate resignations, and I have them here ready for you to sign.
He says lives could have been saved if the city would have alerted the neighborhood to the active shooter, though his tone has changed today.
I think that's really good feedback.
In part thanks to new City Council member Megan Patton, who now represents Hedingham's District B.
First of all, I was angry, and I was lashing out and didn't really know where to direct that anger at the time. I've learned a lot since then about what the City Council is able to do and what they're not able to do.
The work of us as elected officials is to hear the emotions and not let that be the stopping point, but rather the starting point.
As a former teacher, Patton is also a member of Moms Demand Action and says she hopes to help reduce gun violence.
It's deeply important to me. I'm I'm not going to forget. It's top of mind all the time.
It's something Steele says he'll never stop pursuing.
Common sense gun control, common sense gun legislation, common sense safety should not be a fight. It shouldn't be the right versus the left. It shouldn't be. It should be everybody for everybody.
A path toward healing and prevention. Rob has made several trips to speak with state legislators to keep both Hedingham and the topic of gun reform top of mind.
So, Sarah, what specifically would he like to see changed?
Justin, Rob is a gun owner himself, but he says all gun owners must face accountability for their weapons. So that includes things like safely locking them up. He also believes in red flag gun laws, which would allow families and law enforcement to temporarily restrict the access of firearms to individuals who are at high risk. Back to you.
Sarah, thanks. Raleigh's greenway system is part of the story here at Hedingham.
Yeah, more than 100 miles of greenway stretch across the city, with miles more reaching into other parts of the triangle. And although one of these trails was where Susan Carnitz and Mary Marshall died that day, greenways as a whole are peaceful places.
Spectrum News 1 reporter Jenna Ray Gartner checked in with the Raleigh Police Department to learn more about how it's working to keep greenways safe 6 months later. Jenna.
Well, shootings can happen anywhere, whether it's a school, a parking lot, or even a trail. And many greenway users say that the trails really aren't the problem, and they hope it doesn't stop people from enjoying them. Volunteers with the Greenway Volunteer Program are out and about, keeping a watchful eye on the ground.
On a beautiful day like this, there's a high chance you'll find Fran Powell out on a greenway. She's a volunteer for the Raleigh Police Department with the Greenway Volunteer Program.
It's one of the things that has been so gratifying for me, because I always tell people, if you're out here anyway, become a volunteer.
She says greenways are a fun place to be, but there are rules in place to keep everyone safe.
It is good to have in the more remote areas it's almost like reassurance that, hey, there's somebody looking out, somebody out on the greenways.
Her job is to be the eyes and ears of the police department, so they can have an extra set of feet on the ground.
I had a friend once ask me about saying hello to everyone, and I said, I want them to remember me. Just like when I say hello to them, I remember them. So that if anything would ever happen, they would say, do you remember seeing that woman with the yellow vest who said hello? Well, it works the other way, too. Do I remember seeing that woman with the stroller? Yeah, I do, because I said hello to her.
Powell reports back to the police department or Parks and Rec if there's a safety or security concern or a maintenance issue.
Excuse me.
I know what you're going to say. I'll hook her up.
He knows he's not supposed to. And that's why as soon as he saw me, he was like, oh, no.
Often she makes sure dogs are on a leash, kids are wearing helmets, and walkers and bikers are staying in their lane. She'll also keep water, Band-Aids, and stickers for the kids on hand.
The main thing with this job is that you are willing to greet, speak, say hello. What you don't want to be is someone who actually looks unapproachable.
But if there's ever a bigger concern, Powell says the best safety precaution is to be aware of your surroundings.
Yes, it can happen anywhere. Does that mean you should avoid doing things that you normally do that you love? No.
That way,
hey there,
people can continue to enjoy the trails across our state.
Hi, how are you? Good, how are you? It's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, this program currently has more than 50 volunteers, but they're working their way toward their goal of 100. Back to you, Justin and Caroline.
Yeah, it's work that's so important and truly makes a difference. Jenna, thank you.
Still ahead, the intersection of faith and advocacy. We hear from people pushing for change as gun violence destroys lives across the country.
Our heart is broken, our city united, as we mourn together.
Those are the words that could apply to almost any city as more and more mass shootings break hearts and take lives across our country. Now, those words you heard came from Nashville, Tennessee, one of the most recent mass shootings where 3 9-year-olds and 3 adults were killed at a private Christian school on March 27th.
And on April 10th, it happened in Louisville, Kentucky. Police say a bank employee shot and killed 5 people and severely wounded a police officer. And earlier this year, 3 separate mass shootings took place in California.
The nonprofit Gun Violence Archive defines a mass shooting as one where 4 or more people are shot and wounded or killed, not including the shooter. Its data shows more than 150 mass shootings just this year in the United States.
Spectrum News 1's Kylie Panetta met up with the executive director of the North Carolina Council of Churches, who says their group has and will continue to be engaged in gun violence prevention.
80% of people in North Carolina identify with a faith community, and something like 77% of those identify as Christians.
Reverend Jennifer Copeland doesn't preach as often as she used to, but as the executive director of the North Carolina Council of Churches, she still provides guidance to people.
It's important to me that the things that were said in the Old Testament prophets, where I'm looking right now in Isaiah, and the New Testament Gospels, come to be the thing we live by in the public square.
People are reaching out to her about a specific concern.
I often get emails and phone calls from people because they know that the North Carolina Council of Churches has been engaged in gun violence prevention for a number of years.
It's been 6 months since the mass shooting in the Raleigh-Hedingham neighborhood. With gun violence making more and more headlines, she says it can be a polarizing and emotional topic, even a source of anxiety.
Well, we try to tell the truth about the numbers, first of all, to sort of ground people and say, oh, now wait just a minute, let's see where you're really in danger. Most of us are not in danger most of the time.
Copeland says statistics from the CDC and National Center for Health Statistics reveal patterns.
Suicide, of course, is the highest number of deaths that are caused by guns. Second is homicides. And then third, interestingly, is accidental deaths.
She believes any group invested in the well-being of a community should feel responsible to change those statistics.
People of faith have a duty to be in the public square advocating for the laws that will make our communities safer.
But she believes reducing and preventing gun deaths ultimately falls on lawmakers.
Always glad to tell people different things they can do, but at the end of the day, it will come down to the laws we have on the books.
Our thanks to Kylie for that report.
And as you've heard, this is a tragedy that unfortunately far too many communities are having to deal with today. The Hedingham community, an example of the pain and heartache left behind, but also the perseverance to push through and the work to heal and create change.
And that's the journey that so many people here are on. We appreciate them sharing their stories, and we thank you for watching.